It was a typical day in the neighborhood, but for one postal worker, things were about to take a dangerous turn. Struggling with a limp, he made his way through the street, unaware of the group of bikers eyeing him with mocking grins. They were used to pushing people around, and today they saw an easy target. Little did they know, the man they were about to ridicule wasn't just any worker. He was a former Green Beret. With years of intense military training and a history of overcoming obstacles, he was more than capable of handling himself. But how would he respond to this unexpected challenge? Would his training kick in, or would he walk away? The tension is rising, and the moment of truth is about to unfold. Stay tuned. The bikers circled around him, revving their engines, their laughter echoing through the quiet street. The postal worker, a man in his mid-40s, had seen enough hardship in his life to know how to keep his cool. His limp wasn't from an accident. It was the result of a wound he'd taken in combat years ago. But the bikers didn't care about his history. To them, he was just another target to bully. As they made snide remarks, he ignored them, delivering his mail as if they weren't there. But one biker, larger than the rest, stepped forward, sneering at him. "You're just a crippled postman," he taunted. The others laughed harder, but something in the postal worker's eyes began to shift. A memory, a reflex, began to stir. The bikers had no idea what they were really dealing with. The largest biker, a hulking figure with tattoos snaking up his arms, took a step closer, his face twisted in mockery. "What's the matter, old man? Can't even walk straight. Maybe you should just go home." The group's laughter grew louder, each snicker a jab at the man's dignity. The postal worker's hand tightened around the corner of his mailbag. He could feel his pulse quickening, but not from fear. It was the feeling of training resurfacing, the same instincts that had kept him alive in countless life-or-death situations. He had been a Green Beret in the toughest environments, where every move could be your last. He faced enemies that made these bikers seem like children. And yet, here he was, forced to endure this humiliation in his own neighborhood. As the bikers continued to taunt him, a sense of something deeper began to stir. Something he thought he'd buried long ago. The trauma, the adrenaline, the readiness to strike, it all came rushing back. He couldn't just walk away. Not now. Not when they were testing him like this. The bikers seemed to sense the shift, the air becoming charged with tension. But they were too drunk on their own bravado to see the danger. They pushed him further, each insult more venomous than the last. One of them, a lanky guy with a bandana, even shoved the postal worker's shoulder, as if daring him to react. But the postal worker didn't move. He was calculating, waiting, the years of discipline in the military slowly taking over. He had learned long ago to pick his battles. This wasn't just about his limp or their taunts, it was about respect. And he wasn't going to let them take that from him. But still, he didn't strike. Not yet. The moment hung in the air like a live wire, crackling with unspoken challenge. The bikers hadn't noticed it yet, but the mood had shifted. The postal worker's body was still, his eyes cold but intense, locked onto the largest biker. His mind flashed back to the days in the military, those quiet moments before chaos erupted, when everything seemed to slow down just before it exploded into action. He was ready now. The lanky biker, emboldened by his own bravado, pushed again, this time with more force, trying to shove the postal worker off balance. "What's the matter, man? Can't take a joke." His voice was sharp, taunting, but there was a nervous edge creeping in. The group watched, waiting for something, anything, to happen. They were all on edge now, sensing the tension in the air, but not fully understanding it. The postal worker's limp had become a symbol of something more. It wasn't just a weakness, it was a badge of endurance. and that was something none of them could truly understand. The postal worker didn't flinch. His gaze didn't waver. Inside, his muscles were coiled tight, ready to react, but he didn't move a muscle. The bikers were closing in, each step echoing like a drumbeat. The sound of engines revving in the background seemed to amplify the stillness between them, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Then the largest biker, fed up with the stalemate, lunged forward, fist raised, aiming to strike. The others cheered, certain they were about to witness an easy win. But the moment the biker's arm reached its peak, something shifted in the air. It wasn't just a punch anymore. It was an attack, one that would set the course for everything that followed. The postal worker's training kicked in instinctively. He didn't need to think. His body moved before his mind even processed the action, his hand shooting out, grabbing the biker's wrist in a vice-like grip and twisting it with precision. The biker howled, trying to pull away, but the postal worker's strength was something the bikers hadn't bargained for. For a split second, time seemed to freeze. The bikers looked on, wide-eyed, as the postal worker stepped forward, a calm calmness in the storm of chaos. His eyes locked on the leader, who now found himself helpless, his arm immobilized. The others seemed to hesitate, unsure of what to do next. Would the postal worker strike again, or would he release the hold and walk away? Every biker in that group now realized they'd made a huge mistake. But it was too late. Just as the largest biker's face twisted in pain, something unexpected happened. The group of bikers who had been silent for a moment suddenly moved in unison. The lanky biker, who had been taunting the postal worker only moments before, reached into his jacket, pulling out a knife. The glint of steel caught the light as he brandished it, aiming straight at the postal worker's chest. A sudden rush of noise erupted from the others as they shouted at him to finish it. For the first time, the postal worker's grip faltered. His attention split between the biker in front of him and the knife now inches away from his face. The tension skyrocketed. It wasn't just a matter of respect anymore. It was his life on the line. The bikers had escalated things too far, and he had no intention of being an easy target. The knife-wielding biker advanced, but the postal worker's instincts took over. He released the hold on the leader's arm in one fluid motion, ducking low to avoid the first slash, his years of military training flooding his senses. The move was quick, practiced, like a reflex. The biker stumbled forward with a snarl, but before he could recover, the postal worker was already behind him, grabbing him by the wrist and twisting the knife out of his hand. The crowd of bikers fell back in shock, staring at the now weaponless man, who stood poised and ready, his posture deadly calm. But the leader wasn't finished. Furious, he lunged with a second knife, a quick slash aimed at the postal worker's midsection. This time, the postal worker reacted faster. He stepped aside and used the biker's own momentum against him, sending him crashing into a nearby mailbox. The bikers were in disarray now, the situation unraveling faster than they could process. But what they didn't see coming was the arrival of another figure from the shadows. The tension broke. The bikers began to scatter, realizing they had just pushed their luck too far. The postal worker watched, confused and slightly relieved. He knew that this man had just saved him from a situation that could have escalated into something far worse. But just as the last of the bikers were retreating into the night, something clicked. The man in the jacket, the one who had just diffused the situation with authority, turned his gaze toward the postal worker. The calmness in his demeanor never faltered, but there was a glint of recognition in his eyes. "You're not just some postal worker, are you?" he said, his voice low but knowing. The words caught the postal worker off guard. His stomach twisted as the realization hit him. This wasn't just a random encounter with a stranger. This man knew something about him. For the first time, the postal worker's facade cracked. His mind raced, connecting dots he hadn't even realized were there. Was this man part of his past? Was there something about this situation he had missed? Before he could respond, the man stepped closer, lowering his voice. You weren't just a Green Beret, were you? You were one of the ones they've been looking for. A ghost. The words stung with a weight that the postal worker wasn't ready to face. The man's expression softened slightly. I know what you've been running from, and I know why you didn't want to get involved. He paused. But it looks like you're involved now, whether you like it or not. The postal worker took a step back, his mind spinning. He had thought he was just an ordinary guy, a postal worker with a limp and a past. But now he realized his past was far from ordinary, and it had come back to find him. The postal worker stood frozen, grappling with the unexpected revelation. His past, long buried beneath years of normalcy, had come rushing back like a flood. But instead of running, he stood tall,